okay? Is it $4 or $5 for a latte? Then you tip them, right? A lot of people don't tip, but these people they're working. They're trying to get it done, and with less staff. But it's not just Starbucks. I mean, I've seen this trend in corporate America. I've worked for corporate America, worked for Clear Channel Communications. I'm a broadcaster, so I can tell you worked for a Clear Channel. Who knows? Salem Communications, and there was another big group that owns a bunch of stations in the country. I just can't remember. It's been a while. But, the consolidation started happening back in the 80s, definitely the 90s, where one person has to do about 5 or 6 different things. And if you're a small business person, you get it already. Staples had those cute commercials where they had the staple button, and somebody would call like Lost and Found, or they'd call Human Resources, and they'd press the staple button. They'd say Staples. That was easy. There's nothing easy about it, but you have to be in today's world an amazing multitasker. I mean, you have to have all these qualities. You can be under the stress, you can be under the gun, but you have that, hi, thanks, welcome to Starbucks. No problem, I get 20 other people, but I'll be right with you. That's the case with Starbucks. So if you find yourself at a drive-thru and it's crazy, they're understaffed. They don't have enough people. They're trying to pay their shareholders or whatever it is. I don't know what the deal is. Maximum profits, the people at the top making all the money, but certainly they've been cutting it. And if guys cutting the staffing basically ups their earnings, but at what expense? And a lot of the employees put together this coworker.org petition basically to say, hey, you muckety mucks at the top, you're cutting customer service. And I would have to say I like Starbucks coffee. I like the breakfast blend, okay? That's my favorite. But I have seen where some of these baristas are, kind of understaffed, and they're kind of short-circuiting back there. They're not the friendliest, but they're doing their best job. Now, if you find a barista that has a smile on her face or his face, and regardless of what the situation is, that's great. But, some of them, they get through it. They do what they have to do. They need the job, and they like the job. A lot of people I've seen at Starbucks, they seem to like their job, but they're not liking it as much because of this survey. So the next time you feel like you're stressed out, you're not alone, because, again, this is something that's happening all over the country. And I'll tell you, I got to thank my dad. I lost my dad in 1995. And he had a massive heart attack. He was a smoker, and it ran in his family, and it happened quick. Just took him out. But anyway, he was telling me in radio, he says, if you want to get into radio, and I was pursuing voiceover and broadcasting and both, voice acting, but he said, if you are going to go into radio, he said, you got to make yourself irreplaceable. And you have to know not just one job here. This was the mid-'80s, okay? We're talking 86. I was 16 years old. He said, you need to know how to voice commercials. You need to know how to get on the microphone and do a talk show, because I was on a talk show station, WMCA, back in the 80s, owned by Strauss Communication. You need to know how to write commercials, produce them. You need to be able to be on the board, screening phone calls, running the board, knowing how sales and engineering work, what the general manager does. And so I learned all these positions. So it would be very difficult if if I worked for a radio group, for them to, step in my office and say you're canned, because I'm doing already 7 or 8 jobs, if you will. Okay. And I've been there where I've worked 80-hour weeks, getting paid pretty well, I'd have to say. Most places took really good care of me, but because of my skill set and what I knew, but it still saved them money. They didn't have to fork out the health care and all this other stuff, but I had to hump it. And, I did what it took, to get the job done. But that's really what the name of the game is these days. That's just where it's been. You have to be good at so many other things. Some of you already know this, but some of the millennials that I have found, they just want to do this one particular thing. And if I've singled you out, I'm sorry. Maybe you're one that realizes this already and gets it and are doing it. You got to know how to do other things. You need to walk and chew gum at the same time. You got to go back to school. You got to learn. You got to innovate. I was talking to a group of people, the Chamber of Commerce, not too long ago in St. Petersburg, and I basically said, as you age, you don't want to become a relic. You want to become relevant. Stay relevant. And that means you have to read. You got to be updated on news and things and events, current events, just a little of everything to make yourself interesting. Okay? Interesting. And keep your vocabulary up. Read books, read newspapers, read them out loud, do these particular things, and keep in practice. It's amazing what emojis will do. I saw a cute little article talking about the negative aspects of emojis. And who was that? Some of the TV shows. Was it maybe Mike Rowe? You know who Mike Rowe is. Yeah, he does commercials and stuff like that. He's on one of the TV shows. But anyway, very popular. And he was talking about, emojis and how people, will abbreviate instead of putting, spelling out 8, they'll put the number 8. And then they'll put an emoji of a clock or whatever. And they're not really knowing how to spell anymore. And he says, I think we need to have a petition to do away with emojis. Because a lot of folks are just simply shorthanding, if you will, in text and really have forgotten how to spell these particular things. And then when it comes down to the interview process, so that's the place where they actually make the decision whether or not they want you to work with them. They're kind of dreaming to find out if you fit into their team. You're not interesting because you're texting all the time. You don't have interview skills. You're not talking. You're not having conversations because you're too busy on social media platforms chatting, but you don't have a face-to-face conversation, interaction with real human beings. That's why it's important to have social interaction. I know some of you don't like people, but you got to get out there. I know it's annoying. It can frustrate you, but hey, here's a picture. A pair of U.S. bombers flying over South China Sea in the latest challenge to Beijing. Oh, yeah, sending a message. We're flexing our might here. And as President Trump and China's President Xi Jinping prepared for a possible meeting on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Germany, he's already met with Putin today. The U.S. Air Force said in a statement that 2 of its amazing B-1B Lancers made the flight from training with Japanese jet fighters in the East China Sea. According to Reuters, this is the clear demonstration of their ability to conduct seamless operations with all of our allies. U.S. Air Force spokesperson Ryan Simpson said, China has made claims to nearly all of the South China Sea, which holds strategic international shipping routes, and about $5 trillion of shipping trade passes through the region every year. Did you know that, folks? $5 trillion of shipping trade passes through the region every year, the South China Sea, according to Reuters. Beijing claims in the regions they have been contested by the Philippines and Taiwan and Vietnam. Beijing's claims in the region. Of course, local neighbors as Malaysia and Philippines and Taiwan and Vietnam, they don't like what China's doing. And neither should us. We have to stand up to this tyrant. China has been, we like cheap goods, though. That's the problem. We like cheap goods. Oh, China. China. There's so many goods that are made in China, it's not even funny. People want cheap merchandise, so they go to China, and they make good stuff. Some of the stuff. Remember the cheap drywall that was getting everybody sick? The builders were using, they had to take it out. Some of the steel that was weak, that was coming from China. Yeah, there's a price that we pay for it. Not all of the stuff is great. They make some nice clothes, but, American companies have gone over there for cheap labor, and they've made it that way, and now reversing those policies is not going to happen overnight by any means and any stretch of the imagination, but I have said this, and I know this sounds a little disturbing, but I think that all of us have blood on our hands. You know, you got children making your sneakers, okay? Under 16 years old in sweatshops in China doing this stuff, okay? And literally working for rice. They're eating grass as the vegetable in China. Slavery is big time over there. They use North Korean labor over there, okay? And guess where that money goes? Goes back to or Un, whatever you want to call him, Kim, buying a Swiss cheese and his beer. Just think twice when you buy something from China. I try to look at the internet and find something that's made in America, and you'll be surprised. There's a really cool, for guys, I don't know if they have women's shirts. We may have saw their series of commercials on television. It's an American-made company. It's called Untuck It. Just when you thought you couldn't innovate a shirt or clothing, but they found a cool way to be able to have guys be able to wear a shirt and untucked and actually look normal and didn't look, throwed, if you will, but looked cool, looked clean, looked purposeful. And they actually sewed it in such a way to where it just fits your person absolutely beautiful and it doesn't look wrong. And it's called Untuck It. They're out of New York. USA company, makes everything over here. I check out their website. They're not a sponsor. I just, whenever I find something good, good product, and I like it and looks good and wears well, pay the money. Electronics, you can find televisions that are made in America and radios. No kidding. You can. You can find all sorts of clothing, sneakers. New Balance is an American company. They're made over here, not in China. But find companies, find alternatives, and be proud that there's made in the USA. I remember there was many more products back in the 80s that had the U.S. flag on it. But when was the last time you really turned over a coffee cup and saw made in the USA? I have some. Oh, the reason that I have some is because the founder of this broadcast actually made sure that the For the People mug was made in the USA. He was the one pounding that in when Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton both told you that free trade was wonderful for Mr. and Mrs. America. Meanwhile, tens of thousands of small factories, medium and large factories and companies disappeared off the shores of America thanks to GATT and NAFTA. And I'll never forget, even though he had an odd, high-pitched voice, Ross Perot, when he used to say, free trade ain't free. Look what it's done to our country, folks. And it's because of greed. Greed. People are greedy. These bad things happen. And now we're ensnared. Who do you think owns most of our debt? China. Chuck used to tell me, he said, don't be surprised in your lifetime, Keith. And he was very serious. He'd say, it might be a sad day for America when the Mandarin flag over the White House is actually lifted and we're all speaking Mandarin one day. Because he knew what was going on. They're buying up our farms, buying up tons of real estate, tons of companies, and they own most of our debt. The Chinese. Well, yes, even Donald Trump's done business with the Chinese. I guess they rent a bank, one of the banks in New York, rent space from, I think, the Trump Tower. I guess they have a bank that's in his building. And I guess he's done business with the Chinese. But I can't say that all Chinese are bad, because there's a lot of hardworking Chinese people in our country that have done some beautiful things and they have built U.S. companies and raised their families over here and have done a great job. And I know some families that are wonderful people, but the government has, seeded a lot of negative things with, cooking their books. Intellectual property has been a a major concern for U.S. companies where intellectual property, they take what we have, redo it, resell it,